You open your eyes to the sound of dripping wax. A single candle burns beside a window, thick with medieval frost, its flame bending like it remembers something it shouldn't. You're in a small stone room. Not quite a monastery. Not quite a home. The kind of place that smells faintly of parchment, wool, and worry. Outside, a distant church bell rings. The kind of bell that doesn't so much mark time as it sighs through it. The night is long, the year somewhere between truth and legend. Perhaps the 14th century. Perhaps later. It doesn't matter. The Middle Ages are always a little blurred around the edges. You shift your weight on the bench. The wood creaks in protest. A voice older than your own. You look around a rough-hewn desk, ink that's more dust than liquid, and a single open page filled with strange repetitions. A scribe's handwriting loops again and again, the same word copied twice. Amen. Amen. Maybe a prayer. Maybe a coincidence. That's the thing about this age. Everything that happens once seems to happen again. The same plagues, the same comets, the same kings who refuse to learn from the ones before them. The world repeats itself so elegantly that you almost suspect someone's handwriting history behind the scenes. Outside, a monk hums softly, his voice weaving through the corridors like warm smoke. He doesn't know that 500 miles away. Another monk in another abbey hums the exact same melody at this very hour, a tune recorded centuries later as identical in rhythm and pause. Historians still debate whether that's possible, or if the melody simply found its way through candlelight and coincidence. You lean closer to the page. The inked word Amen bleeds into a faint shape that looks almost like your reflection, or maybe someone else's. Scholars, centuries later, will notice that many manuscripts from the same year bear the same accidental ink mark, the same smudge at the same spot. Some will call it a shared superstition. Others whisper about something stranger that people were, in some way, unconsciously echoing one another across distance and time. You glance toward the door, and the corridor beyond seems to breathe. The wind pushes against the stones, and for a heartbeat, the candle flickers out, only to flare back exactly as before, its shape identical, as though rewound by unseen hands. You blink once, twice. The flame holds steady, defiant. The strangest thing about history isn't the wars or the saints or the blood or the miracles. It's the patterns. The little echoes that refuse to fade. One king dies of a fall from his horse. Another, a century later, falls the same way, on the same date, in the same town. Two architects draw identical cathedrals without ever meeting. Two scribes invent the same phrase, God sleeps lightly. It's all absurd, really, but absurdity is comforting in its own way. The past, like your favorite bedtime story, seems to loop until it finds an ending worth resting in. The room grows warmer now. Somewhere, a cat purrs under the table, or maybe it's the sound of your own pulse in your ears. You can almost hear the voice of a gentle narrator. Me, I suppose, saying softly, if you're enjoying this quiet drift through medieval mystery, remember to subscribe, not because it helps me, but because it tells the algorithm you prefer soft, candlelit absurdities to loud, modern chaos. And if you're awake enough, leave a comment below. Tell me your city, your time zone, and whether your own night feels strangely familiar too. After all, the Middle Ages would tell you that even your yawn tonight might echo one from 8 centuries ago. Now the wind quiets. The candle hums again, steady and small. You take a slow breath and let your eyes wander to the frost, tracing the window thin loops that spiral in patterns you swear you've seen before. Maybe you have. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. You wake to the sound of distant hooves, not close enough to threaten, just enough to remind you that someone else exists out there, following the same frozen road. The candles burn shorter now, its wax pooled into a shape that oddly resembles a crown. You smile faintly. In this century, everything seems to want to be symbolic, even puddles. You step into the chill corridor, your breath forming soft ghosts in the air. The stone floor is uneven, polished only by the thousands of feet that have shuffled here before yours. You walk slowly, listening to the faint creaks above you, wooden beams settling, or maybe monks moving in patterns they've followed for years without question. Somewhere between the crackling of the hearth and the echo of your own footsteps, You remember a strange story one historians still bring up with half a grin and half a shiver. It's about two kings, or rather, two kingdoms that seem to share the same script. King Louis of France and King Philip of Spain, different crowns, different lands, and yet their lives read like a mirrored poem. Both born under eclipses, both wedded on the same day to women named Isabella, both lost their heirs to mysterious fevers during Lent, and, in the kind of cruel symmetry that makes you suspect the universe has a dry sense of humor, both died of infections caused by a splinter from their own throne chairs. Coincidence? Probably. But then, medieval chroniclers loved coincidences. They read meaning into everything. Two plagues arriving at once? Divine punishment. Two farmers planting on the same morning? A sign of good harvest. Two comets streaking the sky in the same year. Surely the apocalypse, again. But the story of Louis and Philip isn't entirely dismissed. Modern historians note that their reigns overlapped during a time of shared court architects and royal letter exchanges, making it possible, though deeply strange, that the coincidences were a kind of subconscious imitation, a monarchic mimicry across borders. Still, no one can explain the splinters. Both chairs were crafted decades apart, by different hands, in different forests. Historians still debate whether the story was real or romanticized, but the medical records are clear enough. Two kings, two identical wounds, two matching deaths. You pause in the corridor. A torch flickers, casting your shadow twice, once long and trembling, once short and still. You notice it and laugh softly. Everything seems doubled tonight. In a small alcove, a copper mirror hangs on the wall, warped, uneven, more like polished metal than glass. You look into it, and for a moment, you see not your face, but the faint outline of a crown. Not quite yours, not quite there. Just the reflection of something ancient, trying to remember its shape. You lean closer, and the reflection wavers, showing a banquet hall, two kings, two thrones, two near-identical queens, smiling with the same practiced patience. The candlelight between them ripples like the reflection of time itself. Then the image fades, leaving only your own drowsy eyes and a smear of soot. The corridor smells faintly of rosemary, the medieval remedy for memory. You brush your hand along the wall and feel warmth, as though the stone has just finished keeping a secret. History is full of these doubles, you think. People repeating each other's lives by accident. Lovers born in the same hour. Writers copying the same line centuries apart. Soldiers dying in identical ways on identical fields. It's as if the past refuses to move forward, preferring to walk in circles like a tired pilgrim. You exhale slowly. Maybe that's comforting. Maybe that's the real shape of history, not a straight line, but a spiral that keeps brushing against its own reflection. You reach the end of the corridor and push open a heavy wooden door. Outside, dawn is grey and kind. Mist curls around the monastery gardens, and a pair of sparrows hop between the stones. One pecks at something, a splinter of wood, maybe. You half smile, half sigh. Some stories repeat whether we want them to or not, and as the first bell of morning tolls, you whisper to yourself, just to see if it feels familiar, you probably won't make it through this day. The echo that answers back sounds suspiciously like agreement. You step outside, and the air tastes faintly of iron and dew. The path ahead is muddy from last night's drizzle, carved by hundreds of boots that all seem to know the same destination. You follow them out of habit more than purpose, as though your feet remember something your mind hasn't learned yet. The road curls down toward a quiet village, the kind where chimneys puff sleepily, and dogs bark only if it's absolutely necessary. You walk past a wooden cross by the roadside, its carving weathered soft by decades of rain. Tied to it with string is a token, a scallop shell, the universal badge of a pilgrim. You reach up, brush your fingers across it, and feel the faint trace of heat. Someone has just been here. Or maybe you've been here before. The villagers call this the Pilgrim's Road, but it's less a road and more a loop. Every few miles, a shrine, a chapel, a saint's well, and always the same name, scratched faintly into the stone. Johannes M. The same hand, the same script, over centuries. Records from monasteries across France and England mention him. Johannes of Kent, the pilgrim who never stopped walking. He appeared in 1189, again in 1264, again in 1330, always older, always claiming to be the same man. His relics supposedly rest in 3 different churches, all claiming authenticity. And in the 15th century, a monk at Canterbury wrote in his ledger, "A traveller came by who said he had been here before, and that I would write this down." It's tempting to dismiss Johannes as a medieval rumour, a figure invented by inns to sell pilgrim bread. Yet in dusty archives, scholars later found coins left at various shrines. Same year, same mint, same scratch along the edge, each placed more than 100 years apart. Historians still debate whether the coins were copied, misplaced, or if someone was playing a very long, very elaborate joke. But the oddest thing about Johannes's legend isn't his supposed immortality. It's that he always described seeing things twice. The same bird, the same child, the same road, as if the world itself had a habit of rewinding for him. One scribe recorded his words, "Every mile feels like a memory, every face a reflection." You walk further down the muddy track, and your boots splash into the same puddle twice. The sound repeats with eerie precision. For a moment, it feels as though time stutters the world, pausing just long enough for your breath to catch. The sky is lightening now, and from the fields, you hear a farmer singing the same short melody you heard in the monastery the night before. You pause, smiling faintly. Perhaps the tune travels on the wind, or perhaps, as the monks used to say, the world has only one song, we just forget the words. A rooster crows, the village stirs. Smoke rises from bakeries and blacksmiths' forges, curling upward in lazy spirals. You watch a baker step outside, wiping flour from his hands, and you swear you've seen his face before. Maybe in another story, maybe another century. He looks up and nods at you, as if greeting an old friend. "Passing through again?" he asks. The question lingers, heavier than it should. You nod, though you can't remember ever stopping here before. Inside his bakery, the air smells like honey and wood ash. On the counter sits a loaf of bread, perfectly round, with a tiny scallop shell pressed into its top, the mark of the pilgrim. "A gift," he says softly. "You'll need it on the road." You thank him, take the bread, and step back into the pale light. The road ahead glimmers faintly with dew, bending toward a forest that seems to hum with quiet recognition. Maybe Johannes is still walking out there somewhere between folklore and fatigue. Or maybe every pilgrim since has been walking in his footprints without knowing it. Either way, you keep moving, half curious, half dreaming. After all, that's how most people travel through history, tracing patterns they can't see, repeating steps someone else once took. And as the morning unfolds, you notice something strange. The scallop shell tied to your wrist catches the sun just as it did in your dream. You've definitely been here before. The path carries you into the woods, where the air smells of moss and iron and rain that hasn't fallen yet. You follow the sound of bells, faint, almost questioning, drifting through the trees. They shouldn't be ringing. It's too early for mass, and too far from any village. But they ring anyway, steady and soft, like a heartbeat from another century. You step over roots and stones until the forest opens into a clearing. There, half swallowed by vines, stands a ruined chapel. The roof has long since caved in, but the bell tower remains crooked and lonely. You look up, expecting silence, but the bell swings gently on its own, as though stirred by invisible hands. You wait for the wind to move, but the air is still. According to local legend, this bell once rang by itself whenever something momentous was about to happen. Not disasters or miracles exactly, just coincidences. Births and deaths that aligned too neatly. Letters that crossed paths in the post. Lovers who met again after swearing they never would. The villagers used to keep track. They called it the Echo Bell. And oddly, the records do line up. It rang the day 2 brothers unknowingly died on opposite sides of a battlefield. The day 2 identical manuscripts were completed in distant monasteries. The night the baker's twin daughters were born, 12 miles apart, under the same moon. Historians still debate whether the bell's rope was rigged by a draft or animals or some forgotten prankster. But no one ever proved it. Even when sealed off for a decade, it still rang 3 times each during a moment the town later called an unlikely rhyme. You step closer. The bell is green with age, etched with Latin letters that time has blurred into something like poetry. You touch its edge, cool, rough, and humming with the faintest vibration. A small plaque below it reads, "Do not ring it twice." You smile a gentle, sleepy smile because warnings like that always seem designed to be tested. You give it the faintest tap. It answers with a note low and warm, echoing through the forest like the sound of memory itself. Moments later, another bell answers far away, impossibly distant. Then another. The sound ripples outward, a soft chorus of agreement across unseen valleys. You can't tell whether it's echo or imitation. You close your eyes, and for a second, you could swear you hear two versions of the same world, overlapping, both ringing in time, both forgetting who started it. When you open your eyes, the forest looks slightly different. The trees lean the other way, the moss thickens, and the chapel door is suddenly ajar. Inside, a shaft of sunlight spills through the roof, lighting the dust like golden rain. On the floor lies an open book, its parchment curled but legible. You kneel and read. The bell will always ring for the repetition of wonder. You tilt your head. It's a pretty phrase. Maybe nonsense, maybe something else. The text is signed, Johannes M. The same name carved along the pilgrim road. You sit there for a while, letting the strange coincidence settle like dust. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you wonder if you've read this scene before, if you've dreamed this ruin, heard these same bells. But the thought drifts away as gently as the sound itself. The breeze stirs at last, brushing through your hair. The forest smells different now, sweeter, calmer, like spring. The bell falls silent, and you feel, strangely, as though something has acknowledged you back. You rise, stretch, and step out into the clearing again. Behind you, the tower leans a little further, sighing into the sunlight. Ahead, the path winds toward a distant village, where roofs glint like tiny mirrors. As you start walking, you realize the rhythm of your footsteps matches the last chime of the bell exactly, impossibly. You slow down, then quicken, and still the timing holds. The forest seems amused, and maybe it's coincidence. Or maybe, as the monks used to whisper, the world keeps time better than we think. By late afternoon, the road delivers you into another settlement, small, quiet, and neatly arranged around a square where geese wander like little white philosophers. The air smells of fresh bread and ink, a combination that feels strangely comforting, as though knowledge itself might be baked into the loaves. You stop near a low building with leaded windows, each one glowing with the buttery light of candles. A sign above the door reads Scriptorium of St. Elred, though the letters have been redrawn so many times that the name looks more like a palimpsest rewritten memory on rewritten memory. Inside, the scriptorium hums with quiet purpose. A dozen scribes bend over parchment, their quills whispering in rhythm like rain against a roof. The air is thick with lamp smoke, vellum dust, and the faint, sweet tang of oak gall ink. You stand at the threshold, unnoticed, for a moment, watching history quite literally being copied. Then you notice something strange. Each scribe seems to be writing the same sentence. The world repeats itself, that we may recognize it, word for word, line for line. They don't look at each other, they don't share notes, yet every page bears the same phrase, in nearly identical hand. You clear your throat. A few heads lift slow, calm, unbothered. One old monk, his hair a halo of grey, motions you over. His quill doesn't pause, even as he speaks. You've come for the miracle, I suppose. You blink. Miracle? He smiles without looking up. The book that writes itself. Or so they say. We began it 20 years ago. Every monk who's ever joined us adds to it without knowing what the others have written. When we compile the pages, the sentences align. Always. He gestures to a bound volume at the end of the table, its leather cover worn soft as skin. You run your fingers over it. The binding, it is warm, as if the book's been waiting. He opens it to a random page. There, in elegant brown ink, is a familiar phrase. The bell will always ring for the repetition of wonder. You look up sharply. Ah, he says, noticing your reaction. You've heard it before. You nod. In the forest. He nods too, as if that makes perfect sense. Then the book has already spoken to you. It always finds its reader. He sets the quill down and leans closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Historians, centuries from now, We'll argue whether this was fraud or faith, whether we merely repeat each other's thoughts unconsciously. But we know better. We've seen it happen. A page left blank overnight fills itself by dawn, words faint as breath, then darker, as if the parchment remembers what it was meant to say. You smile, half skeptical, half enchanted. You're sure no one's sneaking in to finish it? Oh, I'm sure, he says with the kind of tired certainty, found only in men who've lived too long with mysteries. I've tried to catch the culprit. But how do you trap a sentence that wants to exist? He turns another page, more of the same, looping handwriting, unmistakably human but eerily consistent. Every scribe's death is recorded in the margins, he continues. But the text never pauses. It just continues. He lets you read in silence for a while. The phrases repeat, transform, rhyme with one another. You begin to feel dizzy, as though the pages themselves are circling back to earlier moments in your journey. And then you see it, right at the bottom of one page. The traveller with the scallop shell will arrive soon. You touch the shell at your wrist. It's still there, catching the candlelight like a small, mocking moon. You close the book gently. Does it ever end? You ask. The monk chuckles, a soft, almost apologetic sound. No, but it does sleep. Every few centuries, it docilely prevecha, waits for someone to read it aloud. Then it wakes again. Outside, the bells of Vespers begin to toll once, twice, then pause, as if listening. The monk looks toward the window, thoughtful. The sound, he murmurs, always comes when someone remembers. You thank him quietly and step outside. The sun is dipping low, staining the sky the color of old parchment. The geese have settled by the fountain, and the villagers light their lamps one by one. As you walk away, the book's last line echoes in your mind. The world repeats itself that we may recognize it. You glance back at the window. For a brief moment, you think you see the monk still writing, but there's no ink on his quill, only light. And as you turn down the next lane, a thought surfaces not entirely yours. Maybe the book isn't writing words. Maybe it's writing you. Night falls slow as honey over the valley, and the road leads you toward a cluster of lights in the mist, a small medieval town, half asleep already. The roofs are steep, the windows tiny, and every doorway has a sprig of dried lavender tucked above it, as if to calm whatever spirits still hover after sunset. The air hums faintly, like distant bees or quiet breathing. You cross a wooden bridge, its planks soft from centuries of footsteps, and step into the main square. A fountain burbles lazily in the middle, its water glinting gold under torchlight. Around it, townsfolk move quietly, not talking much, just preparing for nightfall. You notice how synchronized they are. Doors close almost at the same second. Curtains draw at the same angle. Even the dogs seem to curl up in unison, as if the town itself exhales all at once. A woman carrying a basket nods as you pass. You'd best find shelter soon, she murmurs, before the dreaming begins. You blink. The dreaming. She only smiles, the knowing kind of smile that says she's told this story 1,000 times. You'll see, she says, and disappears into the hush. You find an inn at the far end of the square, the sleeping star, painted faintly above the door. Inside, the air smells of beeswax and barley. A fire crackles in the hearth, painting the walls in slow, amber rhythm. The innkeeper, a tall man with eyes like burnt sugar, pours you ale and speaks with a softness that makes the words drift. Stay the night, traveller, he says. The town sleeps better when guests share the dream. You raise an eyebrow, half amused, half unsettled. You mean you all dream together? He nods, as if it's the most ordinary thing in the world. Has been that way for generations. Each night, when the last bell rings, we drift into the same story. Some say it began when the bell first rang itself. The phrase makes your shoulders tense. You don't mention the ruined chapel or the echoing bells you heard earlier. He continues, lowering his voice as he wipes a glass. We've dreamt of kings, and plagues, floods, and feasts. Sometimes we dream of visitors. Sometimes, he glances at you, we dream of the same one twice. You sip your ale slowly, trying to decide if you're being teased or initiated. And if someone refuses to sleep, he chuckles, warm and low. Then the dream goes on without them. But sooner or later, it finds a way to bring them in. You finish the drink and head upstairs to your room. The walls are timbered, the window small and moonlit. You lie down on the straw mattress, still skeptical, but the rhythmic creak of the building below lulls you faster than expected. Somewhere outside, the last bell rings soft, almost shy, and then the world tilts. You're standing in the square again, but this time everything glows faintly blue, as if moonlight has decided to stay and watch. The villagers are there too, hundreds of them, eyes closed, walking in slow circles around the fountain. Their lips move, whispering fragments of stories you half recognize. Kings falling from horses, bells ringing alone, a book that writes itself. A small child passes by, holding a candle that doesn't burn down. She looks at you and says, "You came from the pages." You try to answer, but your voice feels far away, stretched thin by sleep. The fountain begins to overflow, its water rising silently, defying logic. Reflected in it are countless faces, all yours, all at different ages, some smiling, some weary. You realize the ripples form words for a moment. The dream continues when you wake. When you open your eyes again, morning has arrived. Sunlight filters through the window, painting thin bars across your blanket. You hear laughter outside the ordinary kind, cheerful and bright. The town is awake. You hurry downstairs, half hoping to find the innkeeper and ask what happened. But the place is empty, except for a pot of warm porridge left on the hearth. You step into the square, people chatting, mending nets, buying bread. Everything perfectly normal. But every person you pass greets you with the same calm, familiar smile. "You slept well," they say. "We know. We saw you there." You don't ask what they mean. You just smile back, pretending this is the most natural morning you've ever had. Because maybe, in some sleepy corner of history, this moment has already happened. And somewhere behind the waking world, the dream keeps walking in circles, soft-footed, echoing, patient as time. You leave the dreaming town after breakfast, though it feels less like leaving and more like waking up twice. The path stretches uphill, into a thinning fog that smells faintly of apples and rain. Behind you, the square grows smaller, until the people and their synchronized lives dissolve into the mist like a story closing itself gently. By midday, you reach a ridge, overlooking a lonely monastery. Not the kind of grand Gothic place found in paintings, but a small, circular structure, surrounded by fruit trees, and time itself moving very slowly. You hear no bells, only the steady click of something mechanical. You follow the sound into a courtyard filled with cogs, wheels, and half-finished inventions. Bronze gears the size of dinner plates lean against barrels, metal arms reach toward the sky like frozen gestures, and in the center, hunched over a table, a friar mutters to himself while adjusting a gear no bigger than a coin. He doesn't notice you at first. His robe is patched, his hands blackened with soot, and his hair sticks out like a cloud that's been thinking too hard. Finally, he glances up, squinting through the haze. "Ah, another traveler come to watch the seconds before seconds exist." You smile politely, trying to make sense of that. "You're building a clock?" He grins, revealing a mouth of tea-stained enthusiasm. "A clock, yes, but not to tell time. To remember it." You tilt your head. "Remember?" "Indeed." He gestures for you to come closer. On the table lies a circular contraption of brass and bone, its pieces engraved with strange markings. "Each turn of this wheel," he says, tapping it gently, "matches the rhythm of a heartbeat. And yet, when it completes one cycle, another begins slightly out of phase. If both run together long enough, they meet again." He looks at you pointedly. "History is like that, don't you think?" You glance down. The gears move silently, their motion hypnotic, smooth, patient, inevitable. The friar continues, almost dreamily. "There are moments that repeat themselves perfectly. Births, deaths, wars, kings, rainstorms, conversations. Even you. You've been here before, you know." You laugh softly. "Everyone says that lately." He doesn't laugh back. "Then perhaps everyone remembers." He steps aside to reveal a small parchment tacked to the wall, covered in identical dates, years apart. "Every time the clock completes its cycle," he says. Something happens. Always the same day, the same hour. Someone appears, someone leaves. The world blinks. He points to a line written in faded ink. The traveller with the scallop shell. Observed again. You feel a chill. Observed? He nods. The bell in the valley rings. The dreamer's dream. And you arrive. It's happened 4 times now. The machine finishes. And then, there you are. You take a step back, uncertain whether to laugh or apologize for existing. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe. His tone carries the kind of half-smile reserved for people who have already outgrown coincidence. Historians will argue. Of course, they'll say gears don't predict pilgrims, that clocks don't remember travelers. He lifts the brass wheel delicately. But they'll be wrong. Time is less like a river than a wheel. It doesn't flow, it turns. And occasionally, he says, turning it between his fingers, it catches the light in, exactly the same way twice. He winds the mechanism once, and the clicking deepens into a soft, rhythmic pulse. The sound is strangely alive, like breathing through metal. Each time I build it, the friar adds quietly, it comes out slightly different. And yet it always tells the same story. A traveller arrives, a bell rings, the manuscript writes another line, the dream begins again. You lean closer. The device hums faintly. Inside the brasswork, tiny reflections flicker a forest, a road, a bell swinging alone. You can almost hear them. Do you ever try to stop it, you ask? He smiles, weary, kind, resigned. Why would I stop the heartbeat of the world? You watch as the mechanism slows. It's ticking now perfectly in sync with your pulse. For a moment, you can't tell whether it's your heart or the machine that's keeping time. Outside, thunder rolls distantly, the soft warning of an oncoming storm. You look toward the sky, 2 flashes of lightning, perfectly spaced. You can't help but whisper, twice. The friar only nods, returning to his gears. It always begins with the echo, he says, and ends with the listener. You thank him and step out into the grey afternoon. The clouds above churn like ink stirred by invisible hands. Behind you, the clock's faint clicking follows you down the hill. Steady, patient, inevitable. And somewhere in the valley below, as if on cue, a single bell rings again once, then again, exactly the same. By the time the storm reaches you, evening has stretched its quiet hands across the landscape. Rain falls in thin silver threads, steady and soft, the sort of rain that doesn't rush, just insists. You take shelter in the first building you find. A manor half swallowed by ivy, its roof sagging like an old thought that refuses to fade. The door opens easily. Inside smells of dust, candle wax, and the faint ghost of lavender. Lightning flickers through cracked windows, revealing faded banners and a long hallway lined with portraits. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Each one the same woman painted at different ages, wearing different gowns, but unmistakably the same. You walk slowly past them. The first shows her young, eyes bright, a book in hand. The next, older, the same eyes, only wiser, perhaps sadder. The third, well, she's looking directly at you now, though that's probably your imagination. A thunderclap interrupts your thoughts, rolling through the old walls like a voice clearing its throat. An inscription beneath one of the paintings catches your eye. Lady Eleanor of Rothwell, painted 1242. Lady Eleanor of Rothwell, painted 1321. Lady Eleanor of Rothwell, painted 1395. You squint. The math doesn't work. Either Eleanor discovered the secret to eternal skincare, or something else entirely is happening. The diary lies open on a nearby table, pages wrinkled with age and damp. You brush off the dust and read. Each time the lightning strikes, I see her blink. Once for the past, once for the future. You look up, half expecting movement, and there it is, the faintest shimmer in the paint. Not quite blinking, more like the surface breathing. The next entry reads, they say the painter died before finishing. And yet, every year, a new portrait appears. No one knows who paints it, or for whom. You glance down the hallway. Indeed, the last portrait looks newer, colours less faded. fresh varnish. You step closer. Her eyes are calm, aware, almost forgiving. In the corner of the canvas, faint letters read, J. M. Johannes again. Of course. Lightning flashes once more, and you swear you see your own outline faintly in the reflection of her pupils. A trick of light, maybe. But still, historians will later catalogue the Eleanor repetitions as one of those odd medieval anomalies. A single lineage of paintings depicting the same face across centuries. Pigment analysis shows consistent technique, identical, materials and brushstrokes impossible to replicate so precisely. Even with tracing, they'll argue endlessly. Was it a family resemblance? A mythic muse passed down? Or something stranger, the painter repeating himself across time? You exhale, smiling at your own unease. Maybe she just had good genes, you mutter under your breath, trying to break the tension. Your voice sounds too loud in the quiet. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaks. You tell yourself it's just the house settling. But deep down, you know the rhythm of that sound, the same two-step pattern the friar's clock made. Click, click, pause, click, click. You walk further down the corridor, the portraits following in peripheral motion. Or maybe you're just tired. The storm outside begins to soften. Candlelight from a distant room flickers two flames, side by side. You step through a doorway into what must once have been a gallery. The final portrait rests on an easel, half finished. The woman's face is nearly complete, except for her eyes left blank, waiting. On the table beside it, a scallop shell sits among brushes and paints. A chill ripples through you. You take one step closer, then another. The air thickens. For an instant, the wet smell of the sea fills the room. Faint salt, old storms, distant echoes. And then you see it. In the reflection of the unfinished eyes, two faint silhouettes yours, and behind you, someone else's. You turn, heart drumming softly, but not fast, just curious. No one's there. Only a mirror on the far wall, cracked right down the middle. When you look back at the painting, the eyes are no longer blank. They're open, calm, familiar. You whisper, "You've been waiting." The wind presses gently against the window, almost answering. Historians still debate whether the Rothwell portraits were forgeries, miracles, or elaborate jokes. The manor eventually burned down, yet the paintings kept reappearing in private collections. Unsigned, anonymous, but always dated exactly 60 years apart. No one knows who paints them now. You leave the manor quietly, the rain easing into mist. The scallop shell glints faintly as you close the door, and somewhere behind you, a single brushstroke finishes itself. Morning arrives like a sigh of relief after the storm, the kind of morning that smells like wet stone and renewal. The road curls through soft green hills, and ahead of you, a bridge appears over a narrow river, its reflection trembling faintly in the slow-moving water. It's old Roman, maybe older, with arches so precise they almost look deliberate in their decay. You step onto the bridge, boots echoing softly against the damp stone. Halfway across, you pause. Something feels off, not wrong, exactly, but doubled. The river's reflection is too perfect. Every stone below mirrors its twin above, even the chips and cracks. You lean over the parapet, expecting ripples to break the illusion, but the water stays eerily still. A man sits at the far end, sketching with a piece of charcoal on parchment. His cloak is frayed, his beard neat, his eyes bright with the weary intelligence of someone who's been awake too long. He looks up and nods, as if greeting an old acquaintance. "Morning," you say. "Or afternoon," he replies. "Depends which side of the bridge you're standing on." You glance back, the sun seems slightly lower on the other bank, shadows stretching the wrong way. You chuckle softly. "An optical trick, then," he grins. "A trick, yes, but whose?" He gestures for you to come closer. "Watch carefully." He tosses a small pebble over the side. It should fall straight down, but halfway through the air, it flickers, vanishes, and then splashes twice. You both watch the ripples expand outward, meeting themselves in perfect symmetry. "A strange currents," you say quietly. He nods. That's what the Masons wrote in the records, strange currents beneath the bridge. They said, sometimes the river reflected the future, not the present. You raise an eyebrow. And how exactly did they know that? He smiles. Because travelers sometimes saw themselves crossing before they began. The sound of running water deepens, almost like laughter. He hands you the parchment he's been sketching. It's a drawing of the bridge, but it's unfinished, half the page blank. Yet even the half that's drawn includes you, standing exactly where you are now, leaning just the way you're leaning. You glance up, the man is still drawing. Except he's not drawing you anymore. He's sketching your reflection in the river instead. The charcoal moves quickly, confidently. Funny thing about this bridge, he says. It connects two villages that no longer exist. The names are gone. The maps erased them centuries ago. But the bridge remains because it connects not places, but moments. He sets the charcoal down and folds his hands. People keep arriving here from different centuries. Monks, merchants, soldiers, even one painter who claimed he'd seen this bridge in a dream. They all leave the same way, quiet, thoughtful, convinced they've crossed twice. You smile, faintly, though you feel that soft unease again, the kind that's almost comforting. Do you ever cross it? He looks toward the far side, where fog drifts low across the water. Once, he says, but I'm still deciding which side I ended up on. You nod, unsure what to say. The river hums, yes. Hums a sound somewhere between a hymn and a heartbeat. You touch the scallop shell at your wrist, out of habit, and the hum briefly syncs with your pulse. Then the man tears his drawing in half. He hands you one piece the side, showing the reflection. You'll need this, he says, in case you forget which way you're walking. You take it gently, fold it into your cloak, and start across. Halfway over, the air feels thicker, the light slightly different. The world holds its breath. You glance down, the reflection is gone. No bridge, no water, just pale mist below, endless and still. You walk faster. The far side approaches, or maybe it's retreating. You can't tell. Then, as your boot touches solid ground, the light shifts again. You turn back. The bridge is there, as calm as ever. The man is gone. Only his parchment remains, caught in a current that flows upstream. You watch it drift away until it disappears beneath the arch, heading toward whatever version of the world still remembers him. Historians later recorded accounts of phantom bridges across Europe, structures built, destroyed, and somehow rebuilt in the same place centuries later. Each one matching the old plans exactly, though no blueprints survived. They called them the crossings that refused to forget. You take a deep breath. The air smells like rain again, though the sky is clear, and as you continue down the path, the faint sound of water lingers behind you, steady, rhythmic, patient, as time itself turning in on its reflection. By dusk, the hills open into a valley washed in soft orange light. You follow the scent of roasting meat and smoke until a bid, wooden sign swings into view. The Hare and Hourglass. Beneath it, the painted motto reads, "We pour what time remembers." You step inside. The tavern is warm, buzzing with the low murmur of voices, tankards clinking gently like a metronome for history. Every wall is covered in carved initials and faded drawings, layers of lives etched into oak. You notice, curiously, that some of the carvings bear dates centuries apart, yet the handwriting looks eerily consistent. The innkeeper greets you with a practiced smile. "Welcome, traveller. You look like someone caught between stories." You chuckle. "Aren't we all?" He gestures to a seat by the hearth. "Then sit, and let the fire remember you." You drop your pack beside the chair, stretching your legs toward the flames. The warmth seeps through your boots, and for the first time today, you feel the ache of distance in your bones. Around you, the tavern hums like a hive of half-forgotten tales. A minstrel plays a slow tune in the corner, one you recognize, though you've never heard it before. The same melody the monks hummed. The same rhythm the dreaming town whispered in their sleep. You order a drink mead, thick and golden, and as you lift the mug, you notice faint etchings on its surface. Words. The traveller returns. The innkeeper notices your hesitation. "Ah," he says, "that one finds its own hands. Always." You turn the mug slightly. Beneath the words, scratched faintly in the wood, are the initials J. M, of course. Johannes again. He pours himself a drink, and leans against the counter. You've met him, haven't you? You tilt your head. Met is a strong word. He's more like a rumor that keeps getting ahead of me. The innkeeper laughs quietly. That's him, yes. Comes through here every few decades. Never older. Always scribbling. Says he's looking for a place that remembers him back. You swirl your drink. And this place does? Oh, the tavern. Remembers everyone. It's what we're built for. You glance around. On every table, candle flames lean the same direction, as if drawn toward a shared breath. The air hums with something low and steady, not noise, exactly, but presence. He sets down a second mug before you. You'll want to try this one, he says. It's called the Second Taste. You raise an eyebrow. What's the first? Whatever you remember drinking before. You laugh, but take a sip anyway. It's familiar, too familiar. Honey, spice, and something like rosemary from a monastery's garden. You realize it's the exact flavor of the ale you drank in the dreaming town. The innkeeper sees your reaction and nods slowly. You see, memory travels better than men do. A young woman at the next table looks up from her parchment. She's sketching something, a circular mechanism, delicate and intricate. The friar's clock. When you look closer, you realize her design includes a tiny bridge. Beneath it, in neat script, she's written, "To remember what repeats." She notices your stare and smiles. "It's not invention," she says. "It's restoration. My grandfather dreamed of this. Said it kept perfect time, but only for those who had lost it. You can't help yourself." "And did he ever finish it?" She shrugs. "He said it finished itself." You laugh softly, but something in her calm certainty unsettles you. Across the room, a man begins telling a story. It's about a chapel whose bell rings by itself. Another guest interrupts claims to have seen the same ruins. They argue gently over details, yet somehow describe the same place from opposite directions. You sip your drink again. The fire crackles. The air grows thick with déjà vu. For a moment, the conversations blend into one: monks, pilgrims, kings, painters, clocks, all parts of the same long, looping song. You realize suddenly that the melody hasn't stopped since you entered. The tavern. It's just changed instruments, from voice to voice, story to story. The innkeeper breaks your reverie with a quiet smile. "Careful, traveler," he says. "Stay too long, and you'll start remembering things that haven't happened yet." You meet his gaze. Would that be so bad? He thinks for a moment, then shakes his head. Only if you try to fix them. Outside, thunder rumbles again, distant this time, polite, like applause from far away. You set down your mug, feeling the faint vibration echo up through your fingertips. The innkeeper nods once, as if to an old rhythm. "It's starting again," he murmurs. "Every cycle needs a listener." You step outside, the night cool and shimmering. The sign of the hare and hourglass swings in the wind, two images forever chasing each other around the painted circle. And somewhere behind you, the tavern door closes softly, as though it's already closing again in another century. The road leaves the tavern like a sentence that's already begun elsewhere. You walk through meadows washed in moonlight, guided by the faint scent of wet stone and wood smoke that seems to belong to another hour entirely. The night feels stretched, not dark, just timeless, as if the world has paused mid-page to take a quiet breath. Eventually, the path turns, and you see it. A chapel perched on a hill, small and white, perfectly preserved. Its edges are too sharp for something built in the Middle Ages, as though it's been freshly carved from memory rather than stone. A single candle burns in the window. You climb the slope, boots sinking into the moss, and push open the heavy door. It doesn't creak, not even once. Inside, the air is cool and clean, not ancient, not musty, just still. The scent of beeswax lingers, warm and gentle, like sunlight stored for emergencies. You look around, every surface gleams faintly. The floorboards, unscarred, the pews, untouched. The altar, spotless. Even, the frescoes on the wall look newly painted saints and angels staring serenely down with eyes that have clearly never faded. And yet, when you touch one of the walls, your fingertips come away dusty. There's no sign of age, but all the evidence of it. Historians, you'll recall, once wrote of such places, chapels that refused to decay, appearing suddenly in records centuries apart, identical each time. One chronicler in 1472 called them the still houses of time. Another, writing 300 years later, claimed to have found the same chapel again, untouched, though the surrounding village had long turned to ruin. You step closer to the altar, and a faint hum vibrates in the air. It's the same tone as the friar's clock, the same rhythm as the dreamer's song. The candle flame flickers twice, then steadies. A book lies open beside it. Not the miraculous manuscript, but something simpler, humbler, a visitor's ledger. You read the most recent entry. Johannes, M. Pilgrim, 1349. Johannes M. Scribe, 1420. Johannes M. Witness, 1511. Johannes M. Traveller, unknown year. You exhale, half amused, half resigned. Of course. You turn the page blank. The quill beside it looks new. You hesitate, then dip it in the ink and write your own name. As the letters dry, you notice the faintest shimmer beneath them, a ghostly second line forming in identical handwriting. Your words, rewritten a heartbeat later. You whisper, echoes, without meaning to. From somewhere above, something shifts a soft, deliberate creak, the kind that belongs to old wood remembering how to move. You glance up and see a small trapdoor in the ceiling. Light leaks through its edges, pale and rhythmic, like breath. Curiosity wins, as it always does. You climb the narrow ladder, each step sounding twice. The upper room is bare, except for a single window and a large brass mirror standing against the wall. Its surface is flawless, reflecting the candlelight below with unsettling clarity. When you step closer, you realize it's not showing you at all, but the chapel, as it was centuries ago. The same pews, the same frescoes, only filled with people. Monks praying, children fidgeting, the air thick with chant and incense. And among them, near the altar, stands Johannes, or someone wearing his tired smile. He turns slightly, as though he's heard you, and in the reflection his eyes meet yours directly. Then the mirror darkens, the image dissolving into liquid shadow. For a second, you see your own face again, but older. You step back, heartbeat steady but deep, that familiar calm unease returning, the kind that feels like remembering. The hum grows louder. You look down through the trapdoor, the candle below has gone out, though the chapel remains perfectly lit. When you descend again, the book on the altar has closed itself. The ink on your signature has dried to a pale gold, and faint new words have appeared beneath it. The traveller writes, and time obeys. You leave quietly, pushing open the door. Outside, the night has not changed. The same moon, the same wind, even the same bird call from the distant trees. Only when you reach the bottom of the hill do you notice your footprints in the moss already lead back upward. Historians still argue whether the ageless chapels were elaborate rebuilds or illusions of memory places where stories grew faster than stone. A few speculate they were built to keep history from unraveling completely, small anchors against time's forgetfulness. Whatever the truth, the candle in the window still burns tonight, exactly as you saw it, and if you ever return, it will greet you again, same flame, same air, same quiet hum, pretending it never knew the difference between centuries and seconds. The next day dawns soft and silver, the sky streaked with thin clouds like brushstrokes. You follow a narrow path lined with birches until it leads to a sprawling stone building that looks both ancient and impossibly new. At first, you mistake it for a monastery until you see the carved letters above the arched entrance, Bibliotheca Somniorum, the Library of Dreams. You push open the heavy doors, and a wave of warm, dusty air greets you. The interior smells of old vellum, candle soot, and rain that hasn't fallen yet. Thousands of books line the shelves, some bound in leather, others in parchment, and a few in materials you can't quite identify. The ceiling disappears into shadow, where thin ropes hang down with bells tied to their ends, chiming faintly whenever a book is removed or replaced. You wander between the shelves. Every few steps, you feel the soft crunch of paper dust beneath your boots, as if the floor itself is shedding memories. A monk at a high desk looks up as you pass. He's young, but his eyes are old, the kind of old that comes from reading things best left unread. "Welcome," he says, softly. You've arrived during the rewriting. You tilt your head. The rewriting? He nods toward the shelves. Every century, the books change their own endings. We don't fight it anymore. You glance around and notice it. Pages turning themselves. Letters fading, rewriting, rearranging. A word here, a phrase there. History quietly editing its own drafts. One open volume catches your eye. You step closer and see your own reflection faintly in the ink. A familiar shimmer that makes you feel both known and copied. The text beneath it reads, "On the 12th night, the traveller found the library where stories rewrote themselves, for memory cannot resist rehearsal." You murmur the line aloud, and as you do, the ink ripples and shifts, the next sentence forming as though listening to your breath. He spoke, and the page obeyed. You look up sharply. The monk is watching you with a faint, sympathetic smile. "It knows you," he says. You sit beside him. "What are these books?" "Everything that has been remembered," he says simply, "and everything that refuses to be forgotten." He closes one volume and runs his thumb along the spine, releasing a puff of golden dust. When a story repeats itself too many times, it wakes up here. You open another book. The script is small, spidery, in Latin and French, and something older. Halfway down the page, a line catches your attention. "The bell will always ring for the repetition of wonder." You laugh quietly. "It's following me." The monk's smile widens, but gently. "No," he says. "You're following it." He leads you deeper into the library, where the shelves narrow and the air thickens. At the end of the corridor sits a single table, and on it, a mirror of polished obsidian. No reflection shows in its surface, only faint lights moving like fish beneath dark water. "This is where the unwritten books go," he says. "They wait to be remembered." He gestures for you to look closer. You hesitate, then lean over the dark surface. Shapes begin to form, not words exactly, but impressions. A chapel on a hill, a bridge trembling over its reflection, a monk winding a clock that beats like a heart. Then, for an instant, you see yourself walking these same halls, centuries older, carrying the same shell. You step back, the air shivering slightly as the image fades. The monk speaks again, voice barely above a whisper. Historians argue whether memory builds the world, or only records it. They say there's a difference. I don't. He hands you a thin book bound in deep blue leather. "Take this," he says. "It's blank now. It won't stay that way." You run your hand across the cover. It's warm, faintly alive. "What am I supposed to write in it?" He smiles. "Whatever you remember next." Outside, the afternoon light has softened to gold. As you step into the open air, a bell chimes from deep within the flow. Library once, twice, slow and patient. You glance back. Through the window, you think you see ink moving on the page of the blue book, though you haven't even opened it yet. Historians later found mention of the dreaming library in letters from scholars who swore they'd read books that changed in their hands, texts that predicted events or corrected forgotten truths. Some dismissed it as allegory. Others called it the conscience of time. You slip the book into your cloak. The wind rises gently, flipping a few birch leaves across the path ahead. And for a brief, impossible moment, you hear whispering the sound of thousands of pages turning at once, as if the world itself were rereading your footsteps. By dusk, the air feels heavy, with that soft, glowing quiet that lives between centuries. You follow a path of worn cobblestones winding through a valley painted in twilight colors, violet mist, gold-edged clouds, the smell of pine and rain. The road ends at a small cottage perched beside a stream, its roof sagging like a thoughtful shrug. A wooden sign hangs from a rusted hinge, Atelier of Stillness. Beneath it, a single brushstroke painted in silver. You knock. The door opens almost immediately, as though it's been waiting. Inside, the air is thick with linseed oil, damp canvas, and candlelight. Paintings lean against every wall, covering the room in frozen motion fields. Faces, windows half open, rivers stopped mid-flow. And there, bent over a canvas, is an old man in a brown cloak. His hair is snow-white, his hands steady as he paints the outline of a bell tower. He doesn't look up. "You're late," he says, in a voice warm with gentle amusement. "I didn't know I was expected." He smiles faintly. No one ever does. You step closer. The painting before him is unfinished, but instantly familiar, the very chapel on the hill you visited, down to the candle burning in the window. Only here, the candle's flame is shaped like a spiral, looping endlessly inward. Beautiful, you murmur. How do you capture light like that? He dabs the brush once more. You don't capture it. You wait until it remembers you. He gestures toward a stool, and you sit, careful not to disturb the jars and brushes scattered across the table. Every painter I've ever known, he continues, tries to trap a moment. But moments don't like being trapped. They like being noticed. You glance around at his other works. In one, a bridge arcs over mist. In another, a tavern glows in the evening dark. In yet another, a pilgrim walks beneath birches, a blue book tucked under their arm. You feel the faint chill of recognition crawl up your spine. These are places I've seen, you say quietly. The old man smiles, eyes twinkling with that particular kindness reserved for people who've just realized they're inside a story. Yes, you've been walking through my sketches. I paint them when they visit me in dreams, sometimes years apart, sometimes all at once. You run a hand over the nearest canvas. The paint is still wet, but cool to the touch, almost breathing. You're saying the places I've been were waiting to be painted, he finishes softly. He sets the brush down, finally turning to you. I don't choose what to paint. The images return until I give them form. Once I do, they disappear from my dreams. But every so often, a traveler passes through, describing them as real. You, perhaps. You laugh nervously. Then what happens when you finish them all? He leans back, sighing. Then I suppose the dream will end. Or begin again. Lightning flickers faintly outside, though the sky remains clear. The cottage glows with warm stillness. He gestures toward a smaller painting propped near the window, one not yet started. The outline is faint, but unmistakable. A figure sitting before a painter, by a fire, holding a scallop shell in one hand. You. He dips his brush and looks at you. Hold still, he murmurs. You almost protest, but something about his tone stops you. The air shifts. The hum of the stream outside slows to near silence. Even the candlelight pauses its flicker. He begins painting soft, deliberate, patient strokes. You can feel the room breathing with him. The sound of each brush against the canvas is almost like the turning of pages or the beating of a slow, old heart. You have kind eyes, he says gently. Tired, but kind. All pilgrims do. When he finishes, he steps back. The figure in the painting you looks peaceful, half-shadowed, caught between presence and memory. He smiles. There. Now you'll never quite vanish. You stand slowly, glancing once more at the chapel, the bridge, the tavern, all captured in paint, all places that seem to hum with your own footprints. Who taught you to paint like this? You ask quietly, he chuckles, rinsing his brush. No one teaches stillness. You just stop long enough to hear it. Outside, the night air smells of pine and thyme. You look back once at the cottage, its window glowing softly, the painter's silhouette bent over another canvas. Historians will later speak of an anonymous artist known only as the Keeper of Echoes, whose paintings depicted medieval places that shouldn't have existed at the same time, bridges, chapels, libraries, all linked by the same motif. A pilgrim with a scallop shell. No one knows what became of the painter, but some of his works, they say, still hang in quiet corners of old cathedrals and museums. If you stare long enough, the candlelight inside them flickers twice. And if you listen very closely, you can almost hear the sound of a brush moving in another century, painting you still. You wake at dawn to the sound of crows gossiping over the valley. The world feels pale and half-finished, the air cool and tasting faintly of metal. The painter's cottage is gone, or rather, it's there, but only as an outline in the mist, like a memory retreating politely once it's done its part. You walk on. The land rises and folds again, and after several hours, the horizon sharpens a silhouette of towers and battlements etched against the morning haze. A castle. Enormous. Silent. Too intact for its age, yet too weary to be new. By the time you reach its gates, your boots are heavy with dust and dew. The drawbridge is down. though there's no guard, no chain, no sound except the steady drip of water from the ramparts. You step cautiously onto the bridge, which groans once beneath your weight, as if relieved to be used again. The courtyard beyond is empty. Grass grows between the cobblestones, but the air feels occupied. Not by people, exactly, but by anticipation. You cross the courtyard and find a great hall lined with banners that have somehow not faded. A long table sits at its center, set for a feast that never happened. Golden plates, pewter goblets, bread still warm to the touch. You pick one up. It's soft, real, fragrant. Someone has just baked it, or will bake it, depending on how time is feeling today. At the head of the table, a throne. Upon it rests a crown, untouched by dust. You hesitate. The crown hums faintly, a sound like distant wind through bells. There's a story you once heard, or maybe read in one of those books that wrote themselves. The sleeping castle of Rennes-le-Vieux, they called it. A fortress that sealed itself after its king vanished one morning without a trace. Every century, the castle would wake for a single day, perfectly preserved, awaiting his return. And anyone who entered during that day would swear they heard footsteps in the halls and music in the walls. You take a step forward. The air grows warmer, denser, alive. Then, faintly, music a harp, plucking the same 3 notes over and over, as if tuning eternity. You follow the sound through a side passage, where torches burn without smoke. The walls are covered in carvings, scenes of battle, harvest, coronation, all repeating the same figures, the same faces, as though history had only 3 characters to choose from. At the end of the hall, a tall mirror framed in gold. Not polished like the one in the chapel, but rippling slightly, like water. Within it, you see a reflection not of yourself, but of a king standing before his court. His face is calm, kind, weary, and he's holding something small in his palm, a scallop shell. He looks up suddenly, straight at you through the mirror. His mouth moves no sound, but you can read the words clearly. Not yet. The music stops. The silence that follows feels thick enough to touch. You step back, your reflection returning, smaller and more fragile than before. Behind you, the throne room flickers, the feast table half full, half empty. The crown gleams faintly, and for a moment, you think you see 2 shadows seated there. One solid, one light. Historians later argued whether the legend of the sleeping castle was metaphor. A political allegory, perhaps, for dynasties that never died but simply forgot their names. Yet some records mention witnesses who claimed to see torchlight on its towers long after the place had fallen to ruin. You glance up now. The banners move, though, no wind blows. The harp string hums once a single note. Something inside you understands it isn't music at all, but a signal. You step closer to the throne and place your hand on the backrest. It's warm, vibrating softly, like a pulse waiting for its owner. The crown trembles once, as though aware of your presence, then stills. You whisper, not entirely to yourself, "I'm not him." A voice, or perhaps the memory of one, replies from nowhere and everywhere at once. You never were, but you remember him. The torches dim. The music fades completely. The air exhales, long and slow, as if the castle has accepted the truth and decided, finally, to rest. You turn and walk out through the courtyard. Behind you, the drawbridge lifts without a sound, sealing the place off again. When you reach the ridge, you glance back once more. The towers are gone, or perhaps just hidden behind the mist. And somewhere far behind you, a harp plays 3 soft notes, perfectly spaced, perfectly identical, as though history itself were quietly tuning again. The mist clears by mid-morning, revealing fields wide as thought. The road has become nothing more than a suggestion, soft lines in the grass, like veins through a sleeping hand. You follow them until you reach a cottage of white stone and blue shutters, perched beside an orchard of crooked apple trees. The air smells faintly of sugar and ink. You knock once. Before your knuckles hit the wood again, the door opens. A woman stands there, older than youth but younger than wisdom, her hair grey only at the edges, her eyes clear as still water. She smiles in a way that feels like recognition rather than greeting. "I was wondering when you'd arrive," she says. You blink. "You were expecting me." She nods and steps aside. "Tea's ready. You always arrive after the castle sleeps." The inside of her home is a study in contradictions. Candles burning beside a mechanical clock, manuscripts stacked next to a brass telescope, a dried scallop shell hanging above the door. Every surface is both old and new, like the world can't decide which version of itself to be here. She pours tea into mismatched cups, the scent of herbs and honey filling the room. "I keep records," she says simply. "Not of the past. Everyone does that. I record what hasn't happened yet." You smile, amused but intrigued. "Ah, a historian of the future?" She grins, stirring her cup. "Something like that. I write what I dream, and every dream eventually happens. Sometimes centuries later, sometimes twice." You look around and notice a shelf of leather-bound books, each labeled with a date that hasn't yet come to pass. 1432, 1786, 2025, 3124. One of them bears today's date or close to it. "Do they all come true?" you ask. She nods. "Every one, but only after they've been forgotten first." That phrase lodges somewhere in your mind the same rhythm as all the other impossibilities you've met along this road. Forgotten first, remembered later. A world that rewrites itself through neglect and rediscovery. You sip your tea, noticing its familiar flavor rosemary and barley, like the monastery's air. "Do you write about Johannes?" you ask quietly. Her expression softens, and she nods. "He was the first one I ever dreamed." A man who kept arriving in other people's stories. A mirror walking through time. But the strange part. She pauses, eyes glinting. "He doesn't remember me yet." Yet? She sets her cup down, rising to fetch one of the books. She opens it to a blank page, then gestures for you to read. As you watch, faint letters begin to appear slow, deliberate, like a candle burning words into existence. The traveller arrives at the orchard. The woman smiles. They speak of the man who never finishes dying. You look up, your voice caught somewhere between disbelief and a laugh. "You're writing this now?" She shakes her head. "No. I wrote this dream years ago." You glance back down. New words form beneath the old ones. He looks down. He does not yet know that he carries the last story. You close the book gently. The air feels charged, humming like the chapel's candlelight. "The last story?" You echo. She nods, her gaze soft but certain. The loop doesn't break on its own. It ends when someone remembers it all at once. You stare into your cup, the tea's surface ripples twice, perfectly symmetrical. "And you think that's me?" "I don't think," she says gently. "I remember." Outside, wind moves through the apple trees, scattering petals that fall like fragments of forgotten parchment. Somewhere far off, a bell tolls faint, familiar, like the echo of a heartbeat shared across centuries. You set your cup down and stand. "If you can see what happens next," you ask, "what do I do?" She smiles, tilting her head. You keep walking, but slower this time. The world remembers itself in your footsteps. You nod, unsure whether to thank her or apologize for existing. She walks you to the door, stopping beside the scallop shell hanging above it. "When you hear the bell again," she says, "you'll know it's time to turn the page." You step outside into the cool air. The orchard hums softly. Bees, tracing the same loops they must have traced every year. You glance back once. The woman is still watching, her silhouette framed in the doorway like a bookmark left for memory to find later. Historians will one day catalogue legends of the seer of Rothmere, the woman who wrote the future backward. Her manuscripts, when discovered, he contained predictions so mundane they almost felt human. The return of a traveller, the burning of a candle, the echo of 2 bells. No one ever found her cottage again. But now and then, travellers claim to pass through an orchard where the air smells faintly of rosemary and thyme, and for a moment they feel watched in a kind, impossible way. You walk on, slower now, the ground soft beneath your boots. The sun slides lower, and the world glows with that familiar calm that feels like recognition. And far away, the bell rings once, then again. The bell fades into the horizon, leaving the air trembling. The road ahead widens into a low plain, covered with morning fog, the kind that turns distance into suggestion. As you walk, a shape emerges: rooftops, chimneys, a church spire, another town. But you don't remember seeing it on any map, not even in the library's shimmering atlas. A weathered sign welcomes you. St. Mero. The letters are faint, the wood splintered. You blink, and for a moment the sign says something else entirely. St. Mirror. You rub your eyes. The words don't change back exactly. They just decide to agree with you again. The town itself feels both busy and asleep. People move through the streets quietly, their footsteps muffled as if walking through layers of gauze. The cobblestones beneath you are too clean for a medieval town: no grime, no straw, not even a footprint left behind. A baker waves from a doorway. "Morning," he calls, his accent strange, like a blend of a dozen regions. "You're early." "Early for what?" you ask. He grins, flour dusting his beard. "For the market. It only happens once." You glance at his stall: apples, bread, candles, but each arranged in pairs, 2 of every item, identical in shape and color. "You mean once a week?" He shakes his head. "No, once." You try to smile politely, but your chest tightens with that familiar half fear, half curiosity that always comes before something impossible. At the far end of the square, a fountain trickles softly. The water looks wrong, moving both forward and backward at once. Children toss stones into it, and the ripples collapse inward instead of spreading outward. You kneel to look closer. Beneath the surface, you see faint reflections of buildings that aren't here: towers, bridges, even that same chapel on the hill. A woman selling candles nearby notices your stare. "Careful with the water," she warns. "It remembers what shouldn't have been." You look up. "How long has this town been here?" She shrugs, eyes unfocused. "Always, I think. Though my grandmother said she woke up here one morning with no idea how she arrived." "Everyone did. We just continued." You stand slowly, scanning the faces around you. Every person you pass seems oddly familiar, echoes of others you've met. The innkeeper from the tavern, a young version of the painter, even a monk humming that same old melody. They smile when you meet their eyes, as if recognizing you from an earlier draft. You wander down a narrow lane until you reach a small stone building labeled Hall of Records. Inside, parchment scrolls line the walls, but every one bears the same title: St. Mero, Founding Charter. Each copy written in a different hand, a different century, yet each identical word for word. You unroll one, scanning the elegant Latin script. The ink glows faintly gold under the candlelight, just like the writing in the chapel ledger. The final line catches your breath. The town was founded twice, on the same morning. You whisper the sentence aloud. The words echo faintly, as though repeated by someone standing directly behind you. You turn, but no one's there. Back outside, the square has changed. The stalls are gone. The fountain is dry. Only the baker remains, brushing crumbs from his apron, though the air smells of fresh bread. "Strange day," he says softly. "It's ending already." You glance up. The sky has dimmed, though the sun still hangs above the hills. A second bell rings, not from a church, but from everywhere at once. The cobblestones tremble. Around you, the buildings begin to fade, not vanish, just become translucent, like wet paint thinning underwater. You can see through them to another St. Mero beneath, older or newer. It's impossible to tell. The baker waves, his form flickering like candlelight. "Don't worry," he says, smiling faintly. "We'll meet you on the other side." "Which side is that?" you ask, raising your voice over the bell. He laughs gently. "Whichever one. You remember." Then he's gone. The square empties completely. You're standing alone in a field of fog. The town has melted back into silence. Only the faint outline of the fountain remains, and in its dry basin, your own reflection. You're not entirely sure it's moving in sync with you anymore. You touch your face. The reflection lags a moment, then catches up, smiling half a second too late. You exhale slowly. "All right," you murmur. "Once." Then, when you look down again, the reflection has vanished. Later historians, the persistent ones, would find no record of a St. Mero, though several identical maps bore faint marks where it should have stood. One 17th century scholar called it the Echo City, a place that existed only when remembered. You walk on through the mist, following a path that now hums faintly underfoot, as if the ground itself is whispering your steps ahead of you. Behind you, the bell rings a third time. This one sounds smaller, like it's coming from inside your own chest. By the time the mist loosens its hold, the world around you feels taller, sharper, carved by wind and echo. A single stone road stretches ahead, spiraling gently upward toward a lonely tower on a ridge. Thin, graceful, and far too high for any sensible medieval architect. You climb. The air grows colder the higher you go, your breath mingling with a faint hum, not the sound of wind, but of pages turning somewhere above you. At the base of the tower door, a plaque reads, Scriptorium Perpetuum, founded and refounded. Someone has carved beneath it, crudely but confidently. It never stops writing. The door opens before you touch it. Inside, the air smells of candle soot, parchment, and rain-soaked quills. A narrow staircase winds upward into shadow, and from its top drifts the sound of scratching pens and murmured Latin. You climb, step by slow step. The hum of writing grows louder, layered hundreds of hands working at once. When you reach the summit, you find a circular chamber filled with scribes. Not monks, not scholars, just people. Men and women, old and young, some dressed in robes, others in modern coats or ancient tunics, all seated at desks that form a perfect spiral around a single column of light. And in the center of that light sits a man with his back to you, writing with deliberate slowness. His ink glows faintly blue. Johannes, you say. He pauses, but doesn't turn. You made good time, he says softly. Or perhaps I made poor use of mine. You step closer. His voice is calm, dry, and oddly familiar, like someone you've heard through centuries of retellings. I've been following you, you say. I know, he replies. I've been writing you. You blink. You're the one behind all this? He chuckles gently. Behind? No. Inside, perhaps. The quill writes, the hand follows, and the story walks itself. You circle around the desk, trying to see his face, but the light from the column blurs everything beyond the outline of his hands. The page before him is filled with tiny, perfect letters, your journey, written in the same voice you've been hearing in your own head since the first candle flickered. You're recording this, you whisper. He dips the quill, still not looking up. Recording, remembering, rehearsing the words, are cousins. The tower writes because silence would undo the world. You glance around. The other scribes write without pause. Each page seems to mirror the next, their handwriting eerily identical. When one finishes a line, the others follow as if synchronized by thought. You look closer. They're all writing your name, over and over. What happens when you stop, you ask. Johannes finally lifts his head, though the light still hides his features. Then the story forgets itself. Towns fade, bells lose count, you vanish again. You feel suddenly, profoundly tired. How many times have we done this? He sighs. 2. Many to count. The story likes its own shape. It curls back like smoke. The pages before him flutter in a slow breeze that shouldn't exist this high. For an instant, the ink rearranges itself, lines forming a mirror of your own reflection, then fading back into words. Why me? You ask quietly. He sets down the quill. Because you're still listening. The hum of quills stops all at once. Silence swells vast, fragile, holy. Johannes looks up at last. His face is familiar in a way that makes your stomach drop, not because you recognize him, but because he looks exactly like you. Older, wearier, eyes bright with the kind of patience that comes from too much knowing. He smiles sadly. Every storyteller writes himself into the story eventually. You whisper, and every traveler becomes the story he follows. He nods. Now you understand. The column of light flickers. The ink on the pages begins to fade, as if being absorbed back into the parchment. The other scribes stand, bowing their heads. What happens now, you ask? Johannes, your reflection, your author, your echo, dips the quill once more. Now, he says softly. You walk until you reach the end of the sentence. He begins writing again, and with each word, the tower grows dimmer, the scribes blur, and your body feels lighter, thinner, as though you're being written out. You look down. Your hands are fading into light, letters forming beneath your skin before dissolving into the air. Wait, you say, half laughing, half pleading. I don't want to disappear. He smiles kindly. You won't. You'll just become legible. The quill moves faster now. The ink hums. The tower trembles, its stones vibrating with every syllable. You take a deep breath. The air tastes like candle smoke and memory. Tell me one thing. You manage. Do you ever stop writing me? For the first time, he pauses. No, he says, because you keep walking. The light flares blinding. Beautiful. The hum becomes a single sustained note, like the bell you've been hearing since the beginning. Then everything goes still. Later, chroniclers, always cautious with miracles, will write about the Tower of Endless Scribes, a ruin found with ink still fresh on its walls, pages fused together like molten glass, and no trace of who wrote them. But a few claim that if you stand there at dusk, you can hear a faint scratching from beneath the stone, as though someone, somewhere, is still writing and waiting for you to take the next step. When the light fades, you find yourself standing somewhere softer soil underfoot, not stone. The air is heavy with the scent of rain and sage. The ringing in your ears gentles into the slow toll of bells somewhere above, their sound rolling over you like waves that have forgotten where shore is. You open your eyes. You're in a garden. It stretches as far as sight allows. Rows of herbs, winding paths, half-sunk statues of saints and philosophers leaning toward one another as if still debating eternity. The sky overhead glows an impossible gold grey, neither dawn nor dusk. You walk along a path lined with rosemary and thyme, brushing the leaves as you go. Each touch releases a new memory. The monastery's hum, the dreaming town's quiet laughter, the painter's cottage. The scents merge until they feel like a language only you can almost understand. At the center of the garden, there's a pool round, calm, perfectly still. A single bell hangs above it, suspended by nothing, swaying gently, though there's no wind. And beside the pool sits a woman. You recognize her voice before she speaks. You've taken your time, she says, smiling faintly. It's the woman from the orchard, the one who wrote the future backward. Only here. She looks younger, her hair streaked with sun, her hands clean of ink. She gestures to the water. Everything you've walked through is here. The echoes gather. The bells remember. You kneel beside the pool. The surface mirrors your face, but also 1,000 other versions. The traveller on the bridge, the pilgrim in the forest, the figure in the painter's studio. All of them breathing in unison. What is this place? You ask softly. The garden between pages, she says. Every story has one. It's where the unwritten moments rest. The bells toll again, once, twice, slowly. Each sound ripples through the pool, rearranging the reflections until only one remains. The chapel's candle, still burning, its flame looping inward. You glance at her. Is it over? She shakes her head. Stories like this don't end. They fold. You've come to where the world pauses between drafts. She picks a leaf from the rosemary bush and lets it fall into the water. The surface trembles. In the ripples, you see flashes. Monks writing, dreamers sleeping, bridges rebuilding, hands painting light, and, faintly, Johannes, or the version of you who stayed in the tower still writing, his ink glowing gold now, not blue. Why do the bells keep ringing? You ask. To remind the next telling where to begin. You stare into the pool. The reflection shifts now, showing the road ahead, still winding. If I walk again, you say, won't it all just repeat? She considers this, then smiles softly. Perhaps, but the repetition is the point. Wonder only exists because it's rediscovered. A breeze stirs. The bell sways once more. For the first time, it makes no sound, only light. The shimmer of air bending with memory. You feel calm, deeply, like a page, exhaling after centuries of being read. She rises. It's almost time, she says. The next echo is waiting. You stand too. noticing how your shadow overlaps perfectly with hers. "Will I see you again?" She laughs quietly. "You already have." And before you can answer, she steps into the fur pool. The water doesn't splash, it opens like glass melting, swallowing her reflection into light. You look up at the suspended bell. For a moment, its shape resembles the scallop shell you've carried since the beginning. Curved, spiraled, eternal. You reach out, and the air beneath it hums, gentle as breath. In the distance, a door opens invisible, but you can feel the draft of possibility rushing through. You turn once more toward the path. The garden glows behind you, the bell glinting like a star that decided to rest closer to earth. Somewhere in the wind, you hear her voice one last time. "Walk slowly. The world is rewriting itself around your footsteps." And so you do. Later chroniclers, combing through half-burned manuscripts, would refer to this place as the Bell Garden, a legend whispered among monks and mystics. They said every sound the world ever made gathered there before becoming silence. No one ever found it. But sometimes, when the evening bells ring twice in perfect rhythm, the air smells briefly of rosemary, and the wind seems to turn the pages of something unseen, waiting for the next traveler to arrive. The path winds downward from the garden, a ribbon of pale stone lit by a dusk that refuses to end. Somewhere behind you, the bell's tone has faded into heartbeat silence. Ahead, the air thickens, filled with the soft murmur of wind moving through unseen arches. You walk until the ground levels, and the shape of a cathedral rises from the haze. It's impossibly vast, built from marble so pale it almost glows from within. No windows, no cross, only hundreds of clock faces carved into the walls, each frozen at a different hour. Their hands gleam faintly in the half-light. As you step through the great doorway, the sound greets you not choir, not bells, but a low pulse, as though time itself were breathing. The floor beneath you is engraved with concentric circles filled with names, some Latin, some French, some yours. You walk slowly down the aisle. Each step feels like stepping into someone else's memory. The air hums with the smell of rain and candle smoke. At the center stands a single altar made of glass. Inside it, a pendulum swings perfectly, endlessly, never slowing. No gears, no mechanism, just motion. You rest your hand against the glass. It's cool, vibrating faintly. For a moment, you can feel its rhythm aligning with your pulse, then surpassing it steady, infinite. A whisper drifts from somewhere above. You're late. You look up. On the balcony above the altar sits a figure cloaked in grey, surrounded by suspended candles. Their flame doesn't flicker, it leans, always in the same direction, like time's own draft. "You know me?" you ask. The figure's voice is kind, almost amused. "I know everyone who's ever kept time." "Are you a priest?" "A custodian," they say. "I keep what others forget to count." You gesture toward the frozen clocks. "What happened to them?" "They stopped," the custodian says simply. "Each one for a different reason. A moment of joy, a death, a hesitation. No 2 hours die the same way." You approach the altar. The pendulum hums, gold and patient. "And this one? This one never dies." The custodian descends the staircase, their grey cloak whispering across the floor. They stand beside you, face hidden in shadow. "Every story ends here," they say, not because it must, but because the world needs to catch its breath before beginning again. You watch the pendulum swing. It feels hypnotic, almost human in its devotion. "If this is where stories end," you murmur, "what happens after?" The custodian tilts their head. "After." It starts again, in smaller handwriting. They reach into their sleeve and pull out something small, a quill, old but unbroken, its tip faintly glowing blue. "Johannes's quill." The custodian offers it to you. "You've been carrying the story long enough," they say. "Now it's yours to rewrite." You hesitate. The quill hums faintly in your hand, alive, familiar. You remember the tower, the ink that glowed, the echo of your own voice saying, "Keep walking." "Rewrite what?" you ask softly. The custodian gestures toward the cathedral's far wall. There, a massive sheet of parchment hangs like a shroud. It's blank except for the faint outline of your own shadow. drawn in light. The story forgets how it ends, they say. It needs to hear it again, but gently this time. You step closer, lifting the quill. The parchment shivers once, like skin remembering touch. You dip the quill into nothing air, light, memory, and begin to write. Your handwriting comes naturally, as if practiced for centuries. Words form without thinking. The bell rang twice. The traveller walked. The world paused and listened. You keep writing, slower now, the quill gliding effortlessly. The pendulum's rhythm matches the cadence of your words. Somewhere behind you, the frozen clocks begin to tick, one after another, their hands moving forward by a breath. The custodian's voice is barely above a whisper. There. That's all it ever wanted, to be remembered kindly. You stop. The parchment glows softly, then fades back to stillness. The quill cools in your hand. Is it finished? You ask. The custodian smiles, though you still can't see their face. Stories never finish. They rest. They gesture toward the great doors. Beyond them, the horizon glows with a light not quite day or night. You should go, they say, before the next traveller arrives. You look back once at the altar. The pendulum still swings, but now you notice something new. A reflection in its motion. A small candle flickering in a chapel window. Far away, eternal. You nod, slip the quill into your cloak, and walk toward the doors. As you step into the open air, all the clocks in the Wrath Cathedral chime at once, hundreds of tones weaving together into a single, harmonious note. The sound rolls across the valley like a sigh that took centuries to finish. Historians later claimed that in some abandoned abbey in France, a single clock began ticking again after 500 years of silence. No one repaired it. Its pendulum, they said, moved on its own, keeping perfect time to no particular hour. And if you listen closely on quiet nights, they say, you can still hear a faint scratching somewhere in the dark, the sound of someone writing the world gently back into motion. When you leave the cathedral, the air outside feels newly washed, as though every molecule has been forgiven. The ground slopes downward toward a wide silver river that glows faintly in the half-light. Its surface is perfectly smooth until you step closer and see that it's flowing in two directions at once. You follow the bank, your reflection gliding beside you like a quiet companion. The water whispers with the soft rhythm of pages turning. Every few steps, fragments of what you've already lived seem to shimmer beneath the surface. The monastery's candle, the bridge, the dreaming town, the painter's hand. Each image floats for a moment, then dissolves, like memories released from the weight of needing to be remembered. You reach a small wooden pier. A boat waits there, tethered loosely by a rope that looks as if it's been tied 100 times and untied 100 more. A woman stands beside it, dressed in plain linen, her face unreadable in the dim light. She nods. The river runs both ways, she says softly. You'll need to choose which direction to remember. You glance at the currents, one pulling upstream, toward mist and the faint sound of bells, the other running down toward open fields, glowing faintly with dawn. Where do they lead, you ask? She smiles gently. Everywhere, but not at the same time. You step into the boat. It rocks, slightly, familiar somehow, as though you've done this before. She unties the rope and pushes you off with a quiet strength. The oar rests easily in your hands. You dip it into the water. The river accepts you. The world around you begins to change. The banks blur, melting into the colors of memory, amber, blue, parchment white. The hum of the current deepens until it sounds like breathing. You realize you're passing places you've walked. The bell chapel, the town that only existed once, the orchard. But they're not ruins now. Each is alive, calm, ordinary. A baker hums a tune. A candle burns steadily without flicker. A monk closes a book and smiles. You feel a quiet ache of recognition. Maybe this is what history looks like when it forgives itself. Halfway down the river, the water begins to glow with faint gold light. The current slows. You look over the side and see that the riverbed is not mud, but countless mirrored shells, scallops, identical to the one tied to your wrist. For the first time, you untie it. The string slips away easily, and the shell drops into the water with the softest sound imaginable. It sinks slowly. finding its place among the others. And as it does, the river steadies, choosing a single direction. You breathe in. The air smells of ink and rosemary and rain. The woman's voice drifts from far behind you. Every traveler ends where the story begins. You look up. The horizon brightens soft, endless gold. For a moment, you think you can see the outline of a tower there, but it's fading, like a page being gently turned. You dip the oar again, the rhythm slow and even. Each stroke feels like punctuation, pausing, continuing, remembering. When the river finally widens into open water, the surface reflects only sky. The distinction between them dissolves until you're not sure if you're floating or falling upward. You close your eyes and let the motion carry you. Somewhere far above or below the bells ring twice. Then silence. Then a third tone. Deeper. Final. Content. Later chroniclers will write that there is a river somewhere in Europe that flows both north and south at once. They'll say that on clear evenings, the water glows faintly, as if lit from within by memory. Some claim that if you drop a shell into it, the current changes course for just a moment, enough to show you everything you've already lived. But they never mention what happens next, because by then, the traveler has already disappeared into the horizon, where the river and the sky exchange names, and the story, for the first time, rests quietly on the shore. When your eyes open again, the oar is gone, and the river has become a street-smooth grey stone gleaming under a colourless dawn. Buildings rise on either side, elegant yet unplaceable, their windows open to nothing. The air hums faintly, as if the whole city were breathing in sleep. You take a few careful steps. The sound of your boots comes back to you not once but twice, the first echo quick, the second slower, almost thoughtful. It feels as if the city is learning how to answer you. Signs hang above doorways, written in languages that shift as you read them. Apotheker, then library, then simply memory. No people, no birds, just a sense of awareness. The wind bends around corners like it remembers which direction you usually turn. At the center stands a square paved with black marble. In its middle, a single column of clear quartz, taller than a bell tower. Inside it, trapped like the shadow of a heartbeat, faint threads of light twist and cross. You lay your palm against the crystal. Instantly, the city awakens. The air fills with soft voices, thousands of them murmuring in harmony, neither joyous nor sad, only endless. Their words tumble together into phrases you half recognize. The bell will ring for the repetition of wonder. Every story folds before it ends. You are written, and you are writing. The quartz vibrates under your hand. The streets flicker. For a heartbeat, you see the same square across centuries. Medieval market stalls, baroque balconies, electric lights. 1,000 versions of the same stone breathing through time. And then, between the shifting images, you glimpse Johannes walking through each age. Unchanged, sometimes carrying books, sometimes a lantern, sometimes only a quill. He passes beside you and looks up as if he knows you're watching. He mouths a single phrase, "Keep listening." The crystal quiets. The voices fade back into air. All that remains is the slow tick of something enormous and unseen, not a clock, but the sound of distance measuring itself. You wander the streets, doorways open onto empty rooms lit by invisible fires. On one wall, someone has written a sentence in soot. When cities remember, travelers rest. You sit on the steps of the square and let the stillness settle. The stone beneath you is warm, like sun held in a hand too long. From somewhere deep below, you hear the faint rush of water, the same double-flowing river, continuing its argument with direction. You realize, with a small smile, that the city isn't abandoned at all. It's waiting to be imagined again. The wind carries a single sound through the streets, a brush against paper, or a pen across parchment. You reach into your cloak and feel the quill you took from the cathedral. It trembles lightly, eager. You take it out, draw it through the air once, and the sound answers back, a whole skyline exhaling. The quartz pillar glows again, brighter this time, like a pulse, finding rhythm. You whisper, almost to yourself, "We're still here." The city replies in the gentlest echo imaginable, "Still here." For a moment, the two words overlap perfectly, and everything bells, towers, rivers, gardens, clocks, lines like gears finally catching. The world holds its breath, balance between repetition and rest. Then the light fades to gold, the echoes soften. Somewhere beyond the walls, a new road begins to form, narrow, dusted with rosemary leaves. You stand, feeling the faint warmth of the stones through your boots. The city hums one last time, a note so low it could be memory itself. You turn toward the road. The quill in your hand grows lighter until it's nothing more than air. Behind you, the quartz pillar releases a single tone, clear, tender, unmistakably familiar. It's the sound of two bells ringing at once, and you begin to walk again, not toward an ending, but into the space where endings quietly become beginnings. The road, out of the echoing city, bends through low hills, until the last roofline vanishes behind you, and only open land remains. Grass whispers in long silver ripples, catching the half-light of a sky that can't decide whether it's morning or dusk. Every step feels lighter now, as if gravity has agreed to let you borrow it rather than own it. After an hour or a century, you reach a wide, level field bordered by trees. The wind falls away. Everything stands still enough to hear your heartbeat. The air smells faintly of cedar and rain-soaked parchment. At first glance, the field is empty. Then the light shifts, and you see them. Faint outlines lying in the grass, as if drawn by shadow rather than shape. Hundreds of silhouettes, people sleeping side by side, perfectly peaceful. No sound, no movement, just the quiet of breaths you can't hear but somehow feel. You kneel beside one. The outline glows faintly where your hand passes above it. It's not frightening. It feels like watching. The memory of rest itself. A voice behind you says, "Careful. They're not gone, just paused." You turn. A figure stands at the edge of the field, wrapped in a cloak the color of twilight. Their face is neither old nor young. Their expression the kind of calm that comes from seeing everything twice. Who are they? You ask. The parts of stories that finished before the endings were written, the stranger replies. Dreamers, pilgrims, echoes. They rest here until someone remembers them again. You look across the field. Some shadows seem newer, crisp at the edges. Others are almost transparent. And you? The stranger smiles. I'm the caretaker. I keep time slow enough that nothing fades completely. They walk beside you through the quiet rows. Each step makes a soft sound, like pages closing. You notice a small glow near the center of the field, a single candle burning beside a stone carved with no name. The caretaker nods toward it. That one's yours, they say simply. You freeze. Mine? For the version of you that needed to stop walking. You approach the stone. The candle flickers once, twice, in perfect rhythm. Beside it lies an object, your scallop shell, polished smooth, the string coiled neatly. You kneel, fingers trembling slightly, and lift it. It feels lighter than air, like a sigh you once forgot to finish. The caretaker's voice drifts behind you. You've carried the story long enough. Let this part rest. You set the shell back down. The flame steadies, then leans gently toward you, as though bowing. The shadow at your feet stretches forward, touches the stone, and then folds into it, merging peacefully. For a long while, you stand there in silence. The air feels warm, full, forgiving. When you finally turn to the caretaker, they're smiling. Not many travelers reach this far, they say. Most stop when the world forgets their footprints. You kept going. You glance across the South, sleeping field. What happens to them when they wake? They walk again, the caretaker says, into someone else's story. You exhale, a sound that feels almost like gratitude. And me? They tilt their head. You still have one step left. The horizon brightens, not gold, not white, but the quiet color of parchment before ink touches it. You realize that the light isn't coming from the sky at all, but from the field itself. Each shadow begins to glow, faintly, as if remembering the shape of being alive. The caretaker gestures toward the path that continues beyond the trees. Go. The story's waiting for its last word. You nod, take one final look at the candle still burning beside your stone, and walk toward the edge of the field. The grass parts softly, whispering in a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like two bells echoing across a great distance. Somewhere behind you, the caretaker calls out. When you reach the end, don't close it too tightly. You smile without turning around. I won't. And with that, you step beneath the trees, where the air tastes of ink and beginnings. The trees thin into a corridor of pale light. Every branch hums faintly. Every leaf glows as if lit from within. You walk slowly, the world narrowing to the rhythm of your breath. Somewhere ahead, water moves, not rushing, just turning, patient as thought. At last, you step out of the forest and see it. A lake, so still, it erases the horizon. No ripples, no wind, just one vast mirror of sky. The far shore dissolves into mist, and in the center, a single candle floats its reflection steady, unwavering. You sit on the grass, boots damp with dew. The air feels lighter than it has in days or centuries. It smells faintly of rosemary and beeswax, the scent that's followed you since the beginning. The quill in your cloak warms, humming softly, as if it knows the moment is near. Across the water, a figure appears distant, blurred by haze. There, walking toward you along the lake's surface, each step sending faint circles through the stillness. You know the gait before you know the face. Johannes. Or perhaps the version of you that stayed behind to write. He stops a few paces away. For the first time, you see him clearly. Older, tired, gentle. His eyes hold both mirth and resignation. The quiet humor of someone who's seen everything repeat until it made sense. You finished it, he says softly. Not yet, he smiles. Good. Stories like this shouldn't end sharply. He kneels, places his hand on the water, and the reflection of the candle flickers twice like a heartbeat or a bell toll. Do you understand it now? He asks. You look down at your hands. They shimmer faintly, thin as ink on parchment. That everything was the same story, you whisper. All the towns, the bells, the bridges. Just different ways the world reminded itself to keep wondering. Johannes nods. Wonder is a kind of faith. Even history believes in it. The candlelight swells. The lake begins to ripple gently, its reflection trembling into gold. He stands, and for a moment, you see your own outline perfectly overlapping his. Take it from here, he says. I've written as far as I can reach. He presses something into your palm, the quill warm, alive, trembling. You look up to thank him, but he's already fading, one letter at a time. The candle remains. Its flame bends once more, as if nodding in approval, and steadies. You kneel at the lake's edge, dip the quill into the water, and begin to write not on paper, but on reflection. Each stroke ripples outward, turning into circles of light. The world repeats itself so that wonder can survive the night. You write another line, slower. And when morning comes, history dreams itself awake again. The quill grows lighter until it's nothing but light between your fingers. The last ripple spreads, touches the far shore, and disappears. The lake goes still once more. Silence, but not empty, full, breathing, eternal. You lie back in the grass, eyes half closed. The sky drifts overhead, like an old page turning. The candle's glow softens, folding itself into dawn. A breeze moves across the water. It smells of parchment, wet earth, and the faint sweetness of sleep. Somewhere far away, the bells ring twice, then once more, a final soft echo, as if even sound needs to rest. You breathe in deeply. Every word you've spoken, every step you've taken, feels like part of a single sentence at last. You exhale slowly, letting the rhythm stretch and fade. The story doesn't close. It exhales. It lingers. It smiles. And the world, for a while, is perfectly still, like ink drying on a page, that finally, kindly, decides to stop writing. The grass beneath you is cool and alive, the sky vast and forgiving. You let your eyes drift open, just enough to see the candle's reflection flatten into morning light. Each breath grows, slower, deeper. The sound of your pulse blends with the hush of the lake until both are one continuous rhythm. You think of every place you've been, the humming monastery, the dreaming village, the painter's quiet studio. None of them feel far away now. They fold into each other like pages of the same book, pressed gently shut. The scent of rosemary lingers. A single bird calls somewhere beyond the trees. the kind of sound that belongs to both waking and sleep. The world around you feels weightless. Time itself seems to yawn and stretch, content to rest for a while. The candle on the water drifts farther from view, its flame shrinking until it becomes just another point of light in the pale sky. You close your eyes again. The air hums faintly, the same hum that has followed you since the first bell, but softer now, content. Every muscle loosens. The thought of tomorrow feels distant, irrelevant. Everything you needed to know has already been whispered. The story's rhythm slows, to match your breathing. The sound of the river, the turning of pages, the quiet ticking of clocks, all fade into one gentle, endless note. You smile without realizing. The earth feels like a pillow, the horizon like a blanket. And somewhere, very far away but still within you, a bell rings one last time, not to wake you, but to let you sleep.